Right. We are now on to chapter 7, and chapter 7 builds upon what we started on chapter 6. Now, chapter 6 talked about partnerships, it talked about sole proprietorship, limited liability corporations. Now, what we're going to do in chapter 7 is start our own business, and we'll talk about some of the concepts from chapter 6 as we work on 7. Okay, so you want to start a new business. Okay, why would you want to do this? Well, there is greater financial success, absolutely. And you can make profits and it's yours. Now, however, on the flip side, you can lose everything. So, keep that in mind. In chapter 6, we saw where a large number of businesses are sole proprietorships. That gives them that independence. It gives them a chance to call their own shots, run a business the way they think it should be run. Now, I'm not going to go each and every one of these 5 here, but the last one I do want to talk about is survival. We talked about this in chapter 6. A lot of businesses are started because a person lost their job and they have to be able to survive. They got to pay their bills and mortgages. Oops. Okay, entrepreneurs. These are individuals that start their own business. They go out there, they take the risk, and they spend their own money. It's their time, and there is something to be said about working for yourself. And you run your own business, and you profit from that, or hopefully you profit from that. So there's a lot of things you can do here. Now, this bottom point here, or this next to the bottom point, the starting a new business can offer opportunities for learning and satisfaction. Absolutely. I would add frustration to that too, because you're not going to know everything. You're going to make mistakes, but you're going to learn from those mistakes. So that's where that learning comes into play, and embrace it. Okay, so a matter of attitude. We have to go in thinking that our business is going to be one of the best businesses around. The product we have is the best, because if you do not have that attitude, your customers aren't going to have that attitude. So you have to develop something that people want. The characteristics, you see these 6 on the screen. Again, I'm not going to go into every one of them. The vision. A vision is a desired future state. It states about where the individual believes they should be and what their company should be and how they're going to get there. That's the vision. Energy. You need to have unlimited amounts of energy. You're looking at least 12 to 14-hour days as you're doing this. And sometimes even longer than that, because again, the entrepreneur, it's your business. No one else is going to pick you up. You're the one's going to do it. The tolerance of failure, absolutely. You're going to make mistakes. May have a business or two that fails. Learn from it, start over. There's a couple of things here I want to talk about. The internal locus control. What happens is that the individual feels like, hey, I'm in control. Whatever happens, it's on me. External locus control is that something, it could be some sort of external factor. That's the reason my business failed, or, it's something that's affecting me. So that's the external locus control. So we're going to take a look at funding options, and some of these, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over them. Loans, I think, have a pretty idea. Crowdfunding, you know, we can get some people to want to go into our business, believe we have a good product, but the problem is they're going to be looking for profits. And so they're going to expect a lot from your business. They're going to put a lot of pressure on you. They're going to tell you things how you should run your business. So be careful about how you do and where you get money. Same holds true with angel investors. Angel investors are individuals who they're looking for companies. They want to start business. They want to see businesses grow. But again, they're doing it for a share. They want to make sure they're getting money out of this. They're not doing this for the goodness of their heart. They're doing this to make money. And then that leads us to venture capitalists. Venture capitalists are companies that they believe will do well. They believe that has a product that's better than some others. But again, they're going to take a share of the ownership. They're making a huge investment, and there are people who are going to tell you what you should do and how you should do it. You have to be prepared for that. A market niche. This is something that you can carve out in a space where you can be profitable in an industry that's dominated by larger players. So let me explain this. Let's say, for example, we have a space of streaming services. So you have HBO Max, you got Hulu, you got Disney Plus, Paramount, Peacock, etc. Okay. So these large companies are the big players in the streaming services. Well, they're general. They got really good, they show sports and they're good products. But let's say that you want to start your own business by having a streaming service. So maybe you can do one dedicated to data analytics, or maybe you can do one that's dedicated to marketing. So what you've done is you carved out that niche within a space so that you can be attractive and that you can be profitable. And so we're able to we're able to carve our little slice of the pie, if you will, into that market and be profitable. Now, there may not be there may not be a need for a product, after we develop it. That's a risk of failure, a tolerance of failure. But there's a chance that, people may like our data analytics streaming service. So these are things we have to take a look at. And so these ideas about the relationships, it's smaller. You can know what your customer wants. You can develop relationships with customers. And so it's a very good way to keep a business and grow that business. Yeah, there's some threats here. We got to take a look. High business failure, absolutely. We've talked about that, having that tolerance of failure. Um, Too little money. The one thing, and I want you to promise me this, and one thing that you have to not do is put your business on a personal credit card. Do not, and also do not mortgage your personal property, such as a house, because if that business fails, the bank is going to take your house. You don't want to do that. That's why it's so important to develop that limited liability corporation that we talked about in chapter 6. The high health insurance cost, we all know health insurance is expensive. Bigger companies are able to use their size to get better rates. You're not going to have that. You're going to have to buy independently, and it's going to be very expensive. If you have a couple of employees, it's going to be very expensive to offer health insurance for them as well. So this survival skills, we know that there has to be a tolerance of failure, and you can look at this chart so that by year two, only 78% are in business still. And look at year 10, only 35% of businesses that started 10 years earlier are still in business. So there's a chance that, or more than a good chance, that your business may fail within that first 10 years. So again, you have to be ready for it, save and learn from it. And if you need to, start a new business. Okay, so there's different ways that we can do a business here. The first one is to start it from scratch. And it's your concept, it's your idea, it's something that's all about you. And that's good. That's really good. And you don't have to, there's no biases, other biases, no other way that somebody else did something. It's all you. And that's part of the con. It's all you. Because again, as we talked about in chapter 6, you're the one in charge. You're the marketer. You're the accounting person. You're everything to this business. That's why we talked earlier in this chapter about it could be 12 to 14-hour days. This is why. Um, you don't have you don't have your reputation. Your product doesn't have a core following. So it's gonna be tough to grow that. A good marketing plan, a good product, a little bit of luck, and the business will grow. But you have to understand that as a new product, it's going to be tough, and people are going to be skeptical of what you're offering. So you want to buy an established business. There's some pros and cons to this, as you can see. Business that's existing, banks will be more apt to give you money because it has a customer base, and a pre-existing customer base has a pre-existing product that's known. You do have customers. Now, the cons of this is that you inherit that company name. Now, you could change the company, and we can talk about that in a second. But if you are buying an organization or buying a company and they had some ethical issues or they had product issues, that's going to linger to you when you buy the company. Now, you could change the name. Instead of being company A, you can call it company, BCD, and change the name, but eventually it's going to come back as the same company. And so you may have to make some changes. Um, an example of this would be ValueJet. ValueJet changed their name, and I'm sorry, they got absorbed by Southwest. And there was a little bit of stigma, hey, you got some ValueJet, but what they did, they ended up shutting ValueJet down. Is what they did. And they took the routes. But they could say, hey, there's part of ValueJet and Southwest, which of course we know Southwest is a good airline. And so they didn't have to worry too much about that. But it could happen if you buy an existing company, you are going to be labeled with some of the issues that that company had. So you want to buy a franchise, and we talked about this a lot in chapter 6. Um, you're buying a brand, you're buying a product. We use the example of chapter 6 of McDonald's for the burgers, the fries, the marketing. So that's one of the key pros of this. A con is that if something were to go happen elsewhere, it could be on you. The example of this, and they talk about national brand of E. coli. This happened about 2 decades ago with Jack in the Box. There was a Jack in the Box on the West Coast that people ate the burger, got E. coli, passed away, unfortunately. So that would affect all the Jack in the Boxes across the country because people are saying, well, I'm not going to eat there. I don't want to die. So even though the Jack in the Boxes, say Indianapolis, had nothing to do with this, what happened on the West Coast, it still could affect the franchise. And so you have to be willing to take these risks. The Small Business Administration, that is a good way to get in a business off the ground. And what they will do is help you get your loan to start your business. Now, it's not a guarantee. Okay. I just want to emphasize that. Working with the Small Business Administration and working with them is not a guarantee, but they will do everything they can to help you progress because as one thing we haven't touched on yet is small businesses and entrepreneurship is the backbone of the U.S. economy. It's not these large corporations. There are many, many more smaller businesses than there are large corporations. And so the government is going to want to see more smaller businesses. And so they're going to do everything they can to help these entrepreneurs. In regards to resources, you can take a look what they have. Obviously, there's local offices. Um, the retired executives, these are people who volunteer their time, and they will talk to you about their experience and what they did and how they did it. It's a great resource. Now, I'm not sure, how many of you are looking to start your own business, if it's something you're interested in, but one thing you got to consider is that you will have to write a business plan. The business plan is a long document. It's much, much more in depth than the marketing plan. The marketing plan is actually part of the business plan. It's going to be intrusive. You go to the bank, they're going to ask a lot of personal information about you, and they're going to make sure that their investment, they being the bank, that they're going to get their money back. That's why you want to incorporate so that if the company does go out of business, if you incorporate, it's not going to take out you're not going to lose your house, you're going to lose your car. All right. So in terms of the business, the executive summary. The executive summary is the last thing that you write in any document. The description of the business, what's the vision? What's the goals? What's the process? The financial data plan, that is where we are telling them how we project we're going to get money, how we get money, when we're going to be profitable. So just a few things about the economy. I mentioned to you that the small businesses are the backbone of the economy. And you can see here that the economy is 99.9% of all businesses is small businesses. Um, that's a lot, obviously a lot. And you see 47.1% of private sector employees. Now, it's not the majority of employees, but it's the businesses. So if someone fails a large corporation, they need to walk on, they can, try to go to a smaller one, smaller company, I'm sorry. They do create new jobs. They fuel innovation. So a lot of companies, the goal is to have this incredible product and get bought out by a large company, and then they can retire for the rest of their lives. So that's one of the goals of some entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurship around the world, y- these have to survive. We have to have new ideas. We have to be able to move forward. And if we stay stagnant, then we're not going to progress. And so small businesses help with that progression and moving forward and things getting better. So what does the factors indicate in terms of rates of entrepreneurship? The income. Um, the necessity entrepreneurship is where people develop their businesses because they had to. They lost their jobs before. Opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost is the next best thing you could be doing than what you're doing now. And so if there's a lower opportunity cost in countries where you can start a new business, great. That's going to encourage entrepreneurship and encourage development. And then you know, the cultural idea, maybe there's a culture of, hey, we want small businesses, we want to grow, and there may not be as many regulations, but there may be some regulations. So this can go both ways. You hopefully you get some growth, and there's going to be some countries say, hey, come on, bring it on. We don't have any regulations. Our culture is ready for entrepreneurs. And so hopefully you find, there's countries out there that can support this. Okay, so that's our discussion about chapter 7. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, as always, please reach out to me and I will see you in chapter 9. We're skipping to chapter 8. We'll see you in chapter 9.